Baffin Island is the largest island in the Canadian archipelago. It is situated west of Greenland and intersects with the Arctic Circle. The expedition lasted from May to September 1953. There were 13 participants. The expedition was organized by the Arctic Institute of North America. Patrick Baird was the leader. There was a specialist for every individual field of science and 2 assistants for general tasks. The expedition was one of the first in which scientists of different faculties cooperated in an interdisciplinary team. 4 Swiss scientists participated in the expedition. With seismic methods, Hans Rötlisberger measured the thickness of the Penny ice cap and a large glacier. Fritz Schwarzenbach worked as a botanist. Jörg Marmet was a physiologist and had a doctorate of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Zurich. He was later the first Swiss mountain climber to reach the summit of Mount Everest. He joined the expedition as a physiologist and mountaineering guide. Hans Weber was responsible for the maintenance of the seismic instruments and other equipment. Hans Weber was an engineer from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Zurich. On a job assignment in Finland, he had learned how to make films. The Arctic Institute was delighted and commissioned him to produce a movie of the expedition. The Swiss Foundation for Alpine Research provided a Bolex 16mm movie camera. I had only 12 reels of film, with 4 minutes per reel. So these 50 minutes had to cover the entire expedition. We met at the Arctic Institute in Montreal. The participants traveled there individually. In those days, flying was very expensive, so we traveled by ship. It was a beautiful journey. I would still travel by ship today, because there is far less appeal in flying. We flew from Montreal to Frobisher Bay on an Air Force plane. Then we changed to a small airplane with skids. We were airlifted to Pangnirtung, a village inhabited by Inuits. The Inuits assisted us with their dog sledges. Today, the situation is completely different. If we were to show this film in Pangnirtung today, the people there would not recognize their own village. In those days, there were just a few tents and houses of Inuits and a radio station for communication. Inuits live in tents. They stayed in Pangnirtung for a few days, then they moved on again, and other groups turned up. We offered them a pot of porridge. They all ate from it at the same time. Later we spent quite a lot of time reorganizing. We had to split provisions and material for the flights to the different camps. It was quite a logistical challenge. We packed for the whole summer. It was a bulk of material, and if you forgot something, you'd surely miss it later on. The material was distributed to the different camps. It was a rather complex undertaking. The Cumberland Peninsula is approximately the size of Switzerland. The Penny Highlands are an enormous region with mountains and glaciers. An area the size of the Swiss canton of Thurgau belonged to the glaciologists and the seismic team. An area of the same size in another valley belonged to the biologists. This huge expanse was our territory. Yes, in such a position, you do feel like a king. A1 was the camp most distant from Pangnirtung. It was situated on the ice cap and was used by the meteorologist and glaciologists. Our first seismic camp, A2, was at the same altitude and also on the ice cap. The base camp was near two lakes on the Pangnirtung Pass. We used several tents. We had a tent for work and usually a kitchen tent. The small sleeping tents had space for 3 men only. The kitchen tent was bigger, so there we could stand upright. Cooking was a hard job, as we had no experience how to cook for 9 people using only one burner. However, my sister had advised me how much rice should be used and how much water should be added. Anyhow, we tried it, and our meal was quite edible. We had enough oats for porridge. That was a fine meal. We also had bacon wrapped in tar. There were some biscuits, too few for our taste, as we had eaten them all up within the first week. I also carried out a physiological experiment. I wanted to know how human beings adapt to cold and how fast acclimatization occurs. Every morning, I determined the basal metabolic rate of all 4 members of our group. The result was a scientific paper published in the physiological literature. Yes, but we had the problem that we were not allowed to open the tins of meat before the measurements were done. The tents were exceedingly robust. They resisted even strong winds if they were properly anchored to the ground. It happened from time to time that a tent collapsed in a storm. It was not a pleasant job to leave your sleeping bag and go out in pajamas or a tracksuit to repair the damaged tent. We measured a temperature of -22 degrees Celsius during a cold period. That is biting cold, especially when the wind is blowing. But we were well equipped to withstand the elements. We had fur boots, anoraks with downfilling, and warm sleeping bags. Adverse weather conditions were commonplace. We were really impressed by a cold period with a so-called whiteout, when strong winds blow clouds of snow around and orientation beyond distances of 10 to 20 meters becomes impossible. It was difficult to use the compass, as we were next to the magnetic North Pole. Of course, we marked our routes, but the tracks were immediately covered by snowdrifts in the next blizzard.
Sofort verwischt gsi, wenn es einen Blizzard gegeben hat. Und der ist also schwierig gewesen.
With ski sledges, we moved our material from the ice cap along a large glacier. This kind of transportation was quite effective, as long as the sledge did not run out of control. It took us nearly a day to go from one camp to the other. The situation on the ice cap was often difficult due to frequent fogs in spring and the beginning of summer. The scientific instruments were partially packed in boxes. These loads were extraordinarily heavy. Coming from Switzerland, we were really surprised when we arrived on Baffin Island. The highest mountains in the Penny Highlands all more or less share the same altitude. It is assumed that Baffin Island was a peneplain, a big plateau at 2,000 to 2,200 meters above sea level. There are two ice caps on top of this plateau. The northern one, Barnes Ice Cap, was the area of the 1950 Baffin Island Expedition. The second one, the Penny Ice Cap, was surveyed by our expedition. Performing a seismic experiment, we put an explosive charge into the ice. We then placed several microphones on the surface of the ice. In addition, we installed a recording station to register on film the waves in the ice after the explosion. It was a kind of sonar device. The explosion shakes the ice. The waves are recorded electronically by the microphones and are registered on a film. We were able to measure the thickness of the ice cap. We could draw the shape of the ground and got a picture of the terrain under the glacier. I was in the tent during the experiment. I did the countdown for filming and started the film just prior to the explosion. The film ran for 2 seconds. Then I developed the film in the dark and removed it. We washed the film in a rivulet, receiving a durable registration of the seismic waves. Of course, nowadays, radar measurements are much faster. But seismic methods have also improved and can reveal details not found by radar. Seismic techniques are still used today, especially in the Antarctic. The electronic equipment of those days was not as reliable as the instruments of today. The techniques were old-fashioned. The very first transistors had just been developed. It was the first time that we saw the midnight sun. Therefore, I decided to walk to the ice cap in the evening and film this phenomenon.
auf die Eiskappe und dort wieder nach der Sonne zu filmen.
Nachher war er fertig am Morgen.
Around 2 or 3 o'clock he had finished his work. He decided to ski down on another glacier and to surprise his colleagues in the tent. He put on his skis and started the descent. I realized that I had chosen the wrong way, so I had to turn back. It was a long haul of about 6 hours.
Das war ziemlich lang, es war etwa 6 Stunden raufzugehen.
It was an arduous ascent. He had no sunglasses and was slowly going snowblind. It was rather difficult. I could not see all that much. Eventually he reached the ice cap. We picked him up and brought him back to our tents. Later we were confronted with another phenomenon of nature. All the winter snow melted within a few weeks, as the sun was now constantly above the horizon. It was a spectacular process. Water was flowing everywhere. All at once, a glacier tongue was no longer covered in snow. It also occurred that an entire blanket of snow slid off a slope, several acres at once. We were impressed by the snow melting off the glaciers, the emerging rivers of meltwater, most difficult to cross. Some of these currents disappeared again into holes in the ice. We often had to cross small or big rivers. We did not take off our boots. We walked straight through the water. We were happy that we had fixed a rope bridge over a broad riverbed at a time when all was still dry. This rope bridge became the only possibility to pass the torrent on our way to base camp. I remember writing in my diary that I had dry boots for the first time in 4 weeks. As a botanist, I had the task to do a survey of plant life on Baffin Island, to study the development of plants during the summer, and to compare the vegetation on Baffin Island with the plants of East Greenland, known to me from 5 previous expeditions. I started my work preparing a list of all plants, flowers, grasses, sedges. Then I was interested to see at which time the different species began to flower. Flowering sets in before the temperature passes freezing point. I continued my work analyzing the altitudinal distribution of flowering plants. In the course of 50 years, remarkable changes are feasible. It is possible that the altitude limits of species move upwards as temperatures are gradually rising. Indeed, I was able to observe such a change during an expedition in summer 2001 to East Greenland. It would be intriguing to compare observations from 1953 on Baffin Island with a new survey in the years to come. I also spent some weeks in the biocamp with the zoologist Adam Watson. It was fascinating, as Watson was the first ornithologist to observe how snowy owls breed hatch and feed their nestlings.
nachher aufkommen. Die Schneehuile
The snowy owls had chosen the valley because in the summer of 1953, lemmings were unusually abundant there. An incredible number of these small marmot-like rodents lived in the tundra, running and digging everywhere.
schottische Zoolog
The Scottish zoologist Adam Watson was wearing his kilt when he joined the expedition in Montreal and had only one pair of trousers with him for 3 months. He was observing a pair of snowy owls whose nest was very near to the tent. He was able to observe a breed from the first eggs till the young owls left the nest. Every day he used to climb onto the huge boulder with the nest. Visiting the nest for the first time, he was thrilled to see the first eggs. He started to measure them assiduously when he was suddenly attacked by the male from behind. He bent down to avoid a strike by the claws of the owl, but the furious male destroyed his trousers. This adventure caused a problem. Adam Watson cut a piece of canvas from the tent to repair his trousers. Arriving with his film camera, Hans Weber discovered the situation. He suggested using the white trouser seat as a guest book to be signed by each visitor of the biocamp. Adam Watson wanted to know which one of the 2 species of lemmings lived on Baffin Island. Therefore, he dissected dead specimens. Adam Watson counted the indigestible mandibles of the lemmings dropped by those 9 young owls. He found that the parent snowy owls had caught more than 4,500 lemmings. In addition, we were able to observe a pair of snow buntings feeding their brood.
Ja, das ist eben ja noch wichtig.
It was also important for us then to climb a few mountains. It was not so easy to find days with good conditions, as we often had bad weather. Moreover, we were obliged to use the fine days for our work. At least we had a few opportunities.
Ein paar schöne Tage haben wir gehabt.
We undertook 3 major tours. The first ascent took us to the highest summit. We were able to prove later that it really was the highest mountain in our area.
Im Jahr 1953
1953 was the year of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. The leader of our expedition, a high-ranking officer in the British Army, suggested dedicating the highest summit of Baffin Island to the Queen. Therefore, it was important to reach the summit of this mountain and confirm its altitude.
Man muss sicher sein, dass es der höchste ist. Der Jürg Marmet hat
Jürg Marmet used a theodolite. He measured the altitude of summits situated along a line from the ice cap to the coast of the sea.
Messungen gemacht über die Höhe von der Berg. So Sabrazeit ist Berg.
Mountaineering in the Arctic was quite new at that time. There had been only a few ascents in Greenland and in the Canadian Arctic. Therefore, the leader of the expedition declared that mountaineering should be an important goal in our exploration work.
Das sollte ein wichtiges Ziel sein.
Our second goal was Mount Asgard, an incredible mountain like a giant sugar cone. We looked for the easiest route, as it was the first ascent of this spectacular summit. With luck, we found good access and accomplished the ascent. Our route was classified later, I believe just 2 years ago, as a 5.9, which means a very difficult ascent. We climbed the mountain with our ordinary expedition boots, as we had no special outfit for rock climbing. Despite this handicap, we completed the first ascent without problems. The only possibility was to climb through a chimney drenched with water. The top of Mount Asgard is covered by an ice cap. The meltwater had found its way through this chimney. No wonder that we reached the summit completely soaked. In recent years, Mount Asgard has been the goal of climbers looking for most difficult ascents. The mountain was also a location for a spectacular James Bond film, in which a parachutist on skis jumped from the peak, which is accessible by helicopter. And then, a tragic situation occurred. We had reached base camp and found a note of the glaciologist Ben Battle, announcing his return for the evening of the previous day, when we were climbing Mount Asgard. But Ben Battle was missing. We started a search. We followed his tracks upwards and later downwards. I knew where Ben Battle was measuring glacier temperatures. It was high up at about 800 meters above sea level. We did not know what had happened. Therefore, we followed his tracks. We first feared that Ben Battle had lost his life somewhere in the big melting river.
Ben Battle irgendwie in dem Gletscherbach ist umgekommen.
We eventually found him and pulled his body out of a pond. We buried him near base camp.
The
critical point and the tragedy of this fatal accident was the situation that the ice was still solid when Ben Battle crossed the frozen pond in the morning.
Der zugefrorene Tümpel gelaufen ist, hat noch gedreht und als zurückgekommen ist durchgebrochen.
On his return, he broke through the ice. It can be assumed that one day before or one day after that crucial time, Ben Battle would have seen the critical state of the ice, and nothing would have happened. We had arranged that a Canadian icebreaker passing Pangnirtung would pick us up sometime at the beginning of September. We had a second arrangement that an amphibian plane of the Canadian Navy would transport the meteorological team from the fjord in the north to base camp and would load our heavy equipment there. Therefore, we had to collect all our material and haul it on our backs, on sledges, or in a small rubber dinghy from the various camps to a place near base camp. The seaplane had difficulties watering on the northern fjord due to the great number of icebergs. Taking off was likewise difficult. We stood on the wings of the seaplane and tried to push away ice floes with long sticks to open a channel long enough for takeoff. At summer's end, we walked through the long valley to the coast of the Pangnirtung Fjord. It was a tiresome trudge of 3 days. Once more, we spent several days in Pangnirtung. We were able to join a group of Inuits sailing out to hunt seals. We awaited the arrival of the CD Howe, an icebreaker of the Canadian government, to bring us back to Montreal.
Ja, das war grossartig. Also ich meine, das Hochgefühl.
That summer was grand. I mean, the feeling to preside over such a big territory and the enthusiasm that we had achieved the first ascent of the spectacular Mount Asgard.
Von dem spektakulären Asgard.
Das sind auch unsere vier.
These are the four Swiss friends: John Rötlisberger, Jürg Marmot, Fritz Schwarzenbach, and myself, Hans Weber. There was hardly an expedition of the same kind again. But the expedition did have a strong influence on Arctic research and acted as a model for another project in Axel Heiberg Land, further north in the Canadian archipelago. These expeditions were led by Fritz Müller, another Swiss scientist, and joined by Professor Omura of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Zurich. I have often been asked which was more beautiful, the ascent of Mount Everest with India and Nepal, or the expedition to the Arctic. Both expeditions were most inspiring. But considering the phenomenal light and the events we witnessed, the Arctic was just as fascinating. I would rather prefer to visit the Arctic once more than climb Mount Everest a second time.
Wahrscheinlich eher in die Arktis noch einmal gehen als auf Mount Everest.